9:18 p.m. Angela Moreno stepped into the lobby, phone in hand, takeout in the other. She glanced up, smiled at the camera. 4 minutes later, she vanished. No elevator footage, no hallway footage, and the camera that caught her last expression held the first clue to a plan meant to leave no trace. At 9:18 p.m., Angela Moreno smiled at the camera. Not a big smile, not staged, just a quick, almost shy expression, the kind people give when they suddenly remember they're being recorded. She was holding Thai takeout in one hand, phone in the other, black sweater, hair pulled back. Normal Tuesday night in Houston. The lobby camera inside the Riverside lofts caught everything clearly. She stepped through the glass doors, paused for half a second near the mailboxes, adjusted the strap on her bag. Then she looked directly up at the lens and smiled. That 12-second clip would be replayed dozens of times later, because after 9:18 p.m., Angela was never seen again. No elevator footage, no hallway recording, no exit camera. And this building had cameras everywhere. At 9:21 p.m., a neighbor used the same lobby entrance. Angela wasn't there. At 11:42 p.m., her older sister Daniela sent a text, "Home safe." It delivered instantly, but it was never opened. Angela lived alone on the 7th floor. Graduate student, quiet, structured, the kind of person who never missed class, never ignored family messages. By 8:07 a.m. the next morning, when she failed to show up for a mandatory research presentation, concern shifted to panic. Her professor called twice, straight to voicemail. By 10:32 a.m., building management reviewed the security footage. They expected to see her ride the elevator up. Instead, they found something else. The camera covering the hallway between the lobby and the elevator bank had a 4-minute gap, not corrupted, not erased, just blank. And it started the exact moment Angela walked out of the lobby frame. The missing 4 minutes didn't look like a glitch. There was no static, no distortion, no flicker. At 9:34 p.m., Angela walked out of the lobby frame toward the elevator corridor. At 9:41 p.m., the feed resumed, clean, stable, empty hallway. Building management insisted the system backed up automatically to a cloud server every night at midnight. It wasn't some outdated DVR in a storage closet. Riverside Lofts marketed itself as secure, modern, monitored. So detectives checked the cloud logs. No sign of remote access, no forced override, no flagged system error. At 9:19 p.m., the elevator on the ground floor registered movement, but it wasn't Angela's key fob. Residents had to tap their fobs inside the cab to access upper floors. The system recorded every scan. Angela's fob never activated, yet the elevator traveled from the lobby to the 5th floor and stopped there for 43 seconds. No fob scan recorded. Then, it returned to the lobby, empty. Quiet pause. Detective Harris replayed the footage from inside the elevator itself. At 9:12 p.m., the doors slid open. No one entered. The cab remained still. But just before the doors closed again, something shifted in the corner of the frame. Not a full figure, not clear enough to identify. Just the faint outline of a shadow moving across the metal wall. Lower voice, like someone standing just outside the camera's angle and waiting, because from that moment forward, Angela's phone stopped transmitting location data. No ping to nearby cell towers, no background app refresh. It didn't power down, it just went silent. Inside a building filled with residents, inside a lobby with cameras, Angela Moreno vanished within 40 feet of her own elevator. And the only thing investigators knew for sure, she wasn't alone in that hallway. Detectives shifted focus from the cameras to the people. Riverside Lofts housed 83 residents, professionals, students, a few short-term renters. No one reported a disturbance that night. But one detail stood out. At 9:16 p.m., 2 minutes before Angela entered the lobby, a food delivery driver signed in at the front desk kiosk. The digital log showed a temporary access code issued for apartment 5B. The resident of 5B, a software consultant named Mark Delaney, confirmed he ordered dinner. Receipt timestamp 9:05 p.m. The driver's GPS data showed arrival at 9:14, departure at 9:23. That overlapped exactly with the 4-minute camera gap. Detectives pulled the exterior street cam facing the entrance. At 9:23 p.m., a white Honda Civic pulled away from the curb, delivery stickers still on the passenger door, license plate visible, registered to a local catering subcontractor. Routine, clean record. When officers interviewed the driver the next afternoon, he seemed confused more than nervous. He remembered dropping off the food. 5th floor. Door opened halfway. Cash tip. Nothing unusual. Did you see anyone in the hallway? Detective Harris asked. The driver hesitated. Maybe, he said slowly. I thought someone was waiting for the elevator. A woman. Dark sweater. Angela had been wearing a black sweater. But I didn't see her face, he added quickly. She was standing back near the wall. Standing back, out of camera view. If Angela was on the 5th floor at 9:19 p.m., that meant she never intended to go home first, and that meant something else. She either followed someone upstairs willingly, or someone convinced her to change direction the moment she stepped out of that lobby. Detectives pulled the full access history for the 5th floor. At 9:19 p.m., the elevator doors opened there. No key fob scan. No digital record of who stepped out. But at 9:08 p.m., apartment 5B's door sensor logged movement. Not a full unlock, just a partial open. Mark Delaney insisted it was the delivery driver. He said he grabbed the bag, closed the door, and went back to his laptop. Video call logs from his company showed he rejoined a meeting at 9:22 p.m. That checked out, but there was another door on that hallway. Apartment 5F. Its resident, 32-year-old Jason Pike, had no delivery that night, no recorded guests, no key fob activity after 6:11 p.m. When officers knocked the next day, he answered quickly, calm, cooperative, said he'd been home all evening, gaming with a headset on. No one could confirm that. Jason worked freelance IT support, mostly remote, minimal contact with neighbors. When detectives asked if he'd seen a woman in a black sweater near the elevator around 9:19 p.m., he shook his head without hesitation. No, I didn't leave my place. But phone records told a different story. At 9:17 p.m., his device briefly disconnected from the building's Wi-Fi. At 9:21 p.m., it reconnected. A 4-minute window. The same 4 minutes Angela vanished from camera view. Tech analysts dug deeper. During that gap, Jason's phone sent a short Bluetooth signal, a proximity handshake, to another device nearby. That device ID? Angela's phone. The connection lasted 11 seconds, long enough to register, not long enough to explain, which meant one thing. At 9:19 p.m., in a hallway with no camera footage, Angela Moreno stood within a few feet of Jason Pike, and neither of them had mentioned it. Detectives didn't arrest Jason Pike that day. They watched him. It's 7:42 p.m., 24 hours after Angela disappeared. Surveillance units parked 2 blocks from Riverside Lofts. Jason left the building carrying a gym bag and a folded laundry basket. He moved calmly, no rush, no visible panic. He drove a silver Ford Escape, clean interior, no obvious damage. Inside his apartment, however, investigators noticed something subtle. The carpet near his entryway was slightly damp. When asked, Jason said he'd spilled a protein shake earlier that afternoon. There was no cup in the trash. Forensics collected a small fiber sample from the hallway outside 5F. Black thread. Synthetic blend. Angela had been wearing a black sweater. That alone meant nothing. But then lab results came back on something else. At 9:22 p.m., 1 minute after the Bluetooth handshake ended, Angela's phone registered a sudden orientation shift from vertical to horizontal, like it had been laid flat or dropped. No emergency call. No voice command activation, just stillness. Cell tower data showed her device never left the building that night. It didn't travel across town. It didn't ping a highway exit. It remained within a 200-foot radius of Riverside Lofts until 3:11 a.m. That's when it powered down, not battery drained, manually shut off. Detectives returned to Jason with a warrant. This time, they brought luminol. In the dim light of his living room, faint patterns began to glow near the baseboards. Not large pools, not obvious stains. Just traces, cleaned, but not completely. Jason watched quietly as the chemical reactions spread across the carpet fibers, and for the first time, his calm expression shifted, because whatever happened in that 4-minute gap, it hadn't stayed in the hallway.
Jason Pike agreed to come downtown voluntarily. He asked if he needed a lawyer. Detective Harris told him that was his choice. At 2:14 p.m., the interview began. Jason sat straight, hands folded loosely on the metal table. No visible shaking, no defensive posture. "I didn't touch her," he said too early. No one had accused him yet. Investigators laid out the timeline slowly. Angela enters at 9:18 p.m. Elevator moves at 9:19. Bluetooth handshake between their phones. Camera blackout. Luminol reaction inside his apartment. Jason listened without interrupting. Then he offered something new. He said Angela knocked on his door, claimed she looked upset, asked if he'd been messing with the Wi-Fi because her connection dropped briefly in the lobby. Jason insisted he open the door halfway, told her he didn't manage building internet, said she walked off toward the elevator again. "That's it," he said. That's the whole interaction. There was one problem. Angela's phone logs showed no attempt to connect to building Wi-Fi at 9:19 p.m. Her device had already been on cellular data since she left campus earlier that evening. She had no reason to complain about a signal. Detectives asked why his own phone disconnected from Wi-Fi at the exact same time. Jason hesitated this time. Router glitch. Happens sometimes. Tech analysis later confirmed the router had not been reset. It had been manually unplugged for 3 minutes and 48 seconds, just long enough to interrupt cloud-based camera uploads in that hallway. When detectives returned to Riverside Lofts to inspect the utility closet, they found the router sitting on a shelf within arm's reach of apartment 5F's door, and someone had recently moved it. The dust outline on the wall made that clear, which meant the blackout wasn't random, it was timed. And someone on the 5th floor knew exactly when Angela would be walking past that camera.
When detectives obtained a full forensic sweep of Jason Pike's apartment, they weren't looking for a confession anymore. They were looking for proof. It's 6:28 a.m., 2 days after Angela vanished. The crime scene unit removed sections of carpet from near the living room wall. The luminol reaction had been faint, but consistent. Lab analysis confirmed the presence of blood. Not enough to determine volume, but enough to extract DNA. Results came back 72 hours later. It matched Angela Moreno. Jason didn't ask for a lawyer this time. He went quiet, said nothing, as detectives explained what that meant. Blood inside his apartment, Bluetooth contact in the hallway, router unplugged during the exact camera gap, elevator movement without a key fob. But there was still one missing piece, Angela's body. Without it, prosecutors knew the case would be harder. Defense could argue accident, could argue she left afterward,
could argue contamination. So detectives retraced Jason's movements after 3:11 a.m., the moment Angela's phone powered down. At 3:24 a.m., a traffic camera 3 blocks from Riverside Lofts captured a silver Ford Escape turning onto West Park Drive, Jason's vehicle. He hadn't mentioned leaving that night. GPS data from his car told a clearer story. Between 3:26 and 4:02 a.m., the vehicle stopped in an undeveloped construction area near Buffalo Bayou. No residences, no streetlights, just dirt access roads and stacked concrete piping. Search teams combed the area the next morning. Fresh tire impressions were still visible in the mud, and about 40 yards from where the SUV had idled for 18 minutes, they found something partially buried beneath loose soil. A black fabric thread, synthetic blend, matching the sweater Angela wore when she smiled at that camera, which meant whatever happened in apartment 5F didn't end there.
Search crews expanded the grid before sunrise. By 8:12 a.m., cadaver dogs began alerting near a cluster of stacked drainage pipes at the construction site. The soil there had been disturbed recently. Not deep, not professional, just uneven enough to draw attention. At 8:47 a.m., officers uncovered a shallow burial. Angela Moreno was found wrapped in a gray bedsheet. No personal belongings, no phone. Medical examiner's preliminary estimate placed time of death between 9:30 and 11 p.m. the night she disappeared. That meant she never left the building alive. Cause of death wasn't immediately released, but investigators confirmed signs of blunt force trauma. Inside Jason's apartment, a heavy metal desk lamp had a small fracture near its base. Microscopic blood traces were later recovered from the seam. When confronted with the recovery site, Jason's composure finally cracked. At 6:03 p.m., during a recorded follow-up interview, he admitted Angela came to his door, but his version shifted. He claimed she accused him of interfering with the building's Wi-Fi system, said she threatened to report him to management. He described it as an argument, said she tried to push past him into the apartment, said he reacted. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he whispered. Soft silence. Detectives didn't respond because the evidence didn't support a sudden hallway confrontation. The router had been unplugged before Angela reached the 5th floor. The camera blackout had been timed, and Jason's car had already been backed into a parking spot that night, trunk facing the alley, which suggested something colder, something planned. Angela smiled at the camera at 9:18 p.m., but someone upstairs was already waiting for her to walk past that hallway.
Prosecutors charged Jason Pike with first-degree murder. The indictment outlined a deliberate sequence, disabling the hallway router, waiting near the elevator, luring Angela toward his door, then striking her inside the apartment. But motive was still unclear. There were no prior police reports between them, no messages, no known relationship, until digital forensics uncovered something buried in Jason's laptop. In a hidden folder, investigators found saved screenshots from the building's internal resident portal, profiles, photos, unit numbers. Angela's profile had been accessed multiple times over the past 2 months. Security logs showed Jason used the portal's maintenance reporting feature to track when residents submitted service requests. Angela had filed 3 in October, all time-stamped publicly within the system. He knew her routine. He knew when she typically returned from campus. And on November 3rd, at 8:52 p.m., Jason searched, building camera cloud sync delay. At trial, defense argued it was obsession, not premeditation, claimed the encounter escalated unexpectedly, but the jury heard about the router placement, the backed-in vehicle, the shallow grave tools purchased from a hardware store at 6:11 p.m. that evening, receipt recovered from his trash. In the courtroom, Angela's sister sat in the front row every day. When prosecutors played the 9:18 p.m. lobby clip, Angela smiling at the camera, the room went silent. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't theatrical, just a young woman stepping into her building,
unaware someone upstairs had already decided her night would end differently. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty on all counts. Jason showed little reaction as the verdict was read, but one question lingered even after sentencing. How long had he been watching her? Because the router wasn't unplugged at random. It was unplugged at exactly the right moment.
Jason Pike was sentenced to life in prison without parole. No dramatic outburst, no apology directed at Angela's family. When asked if he wished to make a final statement, he simply said, "I'm sorry it happened. Not sorry for planning it. Not sorry for disabling the router. Just sorry it happened." In the months after the trial, Riverside Lofts upgraded its entire security system. Hardwired cameras, enclosed router cabinets, two-step cloud authentication. Residents said the building felt different, quieter, more watchful. Angela's apartment remained empty for nearly a year. Management eventually repainted the walls, replaced the carpet, and reassigned the unit number. But for those who lived there in November, one detail never faded. At exactly 9:18 p.m. on November 3rd, Angela smiled at a lobby camera. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't afraid. She looked like someone finishing an ordinary day. Investigators later determined Jason had monitored the resident portal for weeks, waiting for a moment when she'd return alone. The router had been tested twice in the days prior, unplugged briefly, then restored. He'd rehearsed the blackout. What he didn't anticipate was the digital trail, the Bluetooth handshake, the car GPS log, the purchase receipt, tiny fragments of data that piece by piece rebuilt the 4 missing minutes. And in the end, that 12-second clip became something else, not just the last image of Angela alive, but the first crack in a plan that was meant to leave no trace. Because sometimes the smallest gesture, a glance upward, a brief smile at a camera, is enough to prove someone was there and enough to prove someone else was waiting.